Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. This is another video in the series of PlaneMaker tutorial videos. This time we're going to be talking about wings, specifically how to create, modify them, position them, change their airfoils, and give them control services possibly. So the first thing I want to do, as always, is to go here to your X-Plane System folder and open up PlaneMaker. I've already done this. And you should be greeted with your fuselage that you may have created last time. If you're not creating a fuselage, just disregard that. So wings are an interesting thing in PlaneMaker. You've got a few interesting properties. So obviously to edit your wings, you want to go to the standard tab and then wings, and you'll see this. So this is all you need to create a basic set of wings for your aircraft. And there are two kinds of wings that PlaneMaker will create for you. One is where you define the properties of your wing, and you get a left wing and a right wing based on those properties. The other kind, you just get one wing with no opposite side. So the wings that are marked wings 1, 2, 3, and 4 will all give you 2 flying surfaces. When you edit your horizontal stabilizer, that's the same thing that's going to happen. For vertical stabilizers and miscellaneous wings, which we'll talk about in a bit, you only get 1. You do not get both sides. So these 3 values right here are what allow you to change your wing's aspect ratio. Now, aspect ratio of a wing is the ratio of your wing span to your mean chord. Now, the chord of a wing, as you can see here, chord is the distance from the leading edge of your wing to the trailing edge at a specific point. And the root chord is that value at the part of your wing where it connects to the fuselage or where it connects to another wing, if that's what you're doing. And tip chord is obviously the distance from the leading edge to the trailing edge of your wing at its tip. Now, semi-length of your wing is 1/2 of your wingspan, and this is because defining a wingspan would only really apply to these 5 tabs, and so they just kept it consistent and said semi-length for the wings that you only get 1 of. And so to create a wing, the first thing you're going to want to do is to define these 3 values right here. You can get a wing that'll show up with only a semi-length and a root chord, because you can have a tip chord of 0 feet and PlaneMaker won't really care. So I just like to kind of do 10 and 10 just to kind of get something I can see. So now I'm making a fighter, so I'm going to need wings that are a bit bigger than that. So the semi-length, as you can see here, semi-length changes the length from the root to the tip of one wing. And as you can see, you can make them really giant, you can make them really small. So this is how you determine your wing area, basically. You set your semi-length, you set your root chord, you set your tip chord. This will help you determine your wing area and your aspect ratio, both of which are values that you will find very useful when you are making changes to your aircraft based on mathematical models. So I've got a wing now, and as you can see, it's at the very, very front of the aircraft, which is right there. I made a few changes to this fuselage because I didn't really like how it turned out compared to the one in the last video. I made the first point actually go a bit past the origin point of the axes, just because that's what I wanted it to do. And again, you'll see here you have 3 values for positioning your wing. You have the longitudinal arm, lateral arm, and vertical arm. So just to start, I'm going to put this kind of at the middle, and if I want to have it a bit more out of the fuselage, I can adjust the lateral arm value. If you do too much, your wings will be floating. X-Plane won't really care, but that's not realistic, so I'm going to make sure that my wings are actually attached to the fuselage. And I want to move them down a bit, so that's what I'm going to do. And now, I'm realizing that, hey, you know what? This is a fighter. This planform won't really do great for that kind of aircraft. So, I'm going to actually make my wing be a bit shorter. I'm going to make my root chord a bit longer. And now I'm going to change my sweep and my dihedral. So now, sweep is the angle. So there's an imaginary line kind of that runs through the say the thickest part of your airfoil here. And you can adjust the angle that that line creates by adjusting your sweep. Sweeping your wing has a few benefits. One, it allows you to fly at higher angles of attack than you normally would with a straight wing, because the swept wing creates these vortices of air under the leading edge that give you a bit more lift at high angles of attack. And also, they are more aerodynamic once you get closer to the transonic and supersonic flight regime. So, maybe I'm going to give myself a 43 degree sweep, let's say. I want it to be a bit longer because I'm going for a delta wing here. And that looks pretty good for a fighter with a delta wing. So now dihedral is another important thing you should be aware of. I'm not going to go super in depth in the physics of how this works, just because it takes up time, and I'd like to keep these videos pretty short if I can, which I haven't been doing a super great job of. So dihedral is basically the angle between the tip and the root of the wing in terms of the vertical axis. And if you have a positive dihedral, when you roll your airplane to one direction, it'll naturally have a tendency to roll back to neutral. For a fighter, you don't really want this, so you want to have a dihedral of 0 degrees, or maybe a negative dihedral, which is called an anhedral. So this means that your aircraft will not try to roll back to a neutral position after you induce a roll moment, which is very handy if you are trying to maneuver in a dogfight. So the next thing you will want to be aware of when you're creating your wing is these element specs. So X-Plane's flight model works using this mathematical principle called blade element theory, which states that you can divide an airfoil or a flying surface into a number of segments or elements. And you can see each part in the wireframe view here is an element. And so I like to have maybe 8 or 10. The maximum you can have is 10. The more you have, the more control you can have over where your control surfaces are, which we'll get into, I think, in the next video, actually. So I just usually max out this value, just because I prefer to have more control. And there you have it. That's how you make a wing. That's how you make a very basic wing. So your horizontal stabilizer and your vertical stabilizer are really just other wings. And I'm going to actually get rid of this delta configuration because I want to actually show you what it looks like when you create a horizontal stabilizer. So I'm just going to move this forward a bit. Now I've got a more traditional looking swept planform. So to create a horizontal stabilizer, it's the exact same process as any of these normal wings. So I'm just going to say maybe 10 feet in semi-length, give it a root chord of 5 feet, maybe a couple feet here, and I'll sweep it a bit to match the planform of my wing. And you can position your horizontal stabilizer in 2 places. Really, the first would be at the front. This is called a canard configuration. For an aircraft that doesn't have a delta wing, this is usually, if it does have horizontal stabilizers, this is where it'll be, because there's not really any other good place to put them if the delta wing extends all the way back. But just for the sake of showing you what a normal aircraft looks like, I'm going to put this at the back of the aircraft. I'm going to give them a bit of lateral separation, just so you can see what that looks like. I'm actually going to make this a bit larger and slightly less swept. And the main difference between a wing and a horizontal stabilizer, at least in terms of X-plane, is that the horizontal stabilizer will have a different airfoil when you create it by default. This is because X-plane by default assumes you want to have a stable aircraft, and so gives you an airfoil configuration that will make that true. We'll get into instability and what to do about that later, but for now, that's all you really need to know about those. Now for horizontal stabilizers, you can again add more elements if you want. I like to have enough so that I can have so the last element that is completely out of the fuselage is as close to the fuselage as is possible. That's just what I do. You don't have to do this yourself, but it makes things look a bit more realistic when you add controls. So, lastly, we want to give ourselves a vertical stabilizer. Now, in X-plane, no matter what, you're going to want one of these. Some aircraft don't have a vertical stabilizer, and that is fine if you've got massively powerful, very fast computer systems dedicated to flight control and keeping your aircraft stable. But X-plane doesn't really do that. So, if you don't have a vertical stabilizer, when you roll the aircraft, there's going to be absolutely nothing except the force of your engines keeping your aircraft staying from flying in a straight line. So you definitely want a vertical stabilizer. At least one, maybe two for better supersonic stability if you're making a fighter. But again, the process to make them and to modify them is exactly the same as it is for other wings. I'm going to give myself a couple more elements just so I can have that nice separation of the control surfaces and fuselage. And so you do the same thing if you want another one. I would just copy over the same values unless you want to have a ventral stabilizer, which would be on the bottom of your aircraft. Some planes have this, some planes don't. It's up to you. Gives you a bit more stability when you're rolling, gets rid of some more adverse yaw, which is what that side-to-side motion when you roll the aircraft is called. So, now that you've created your wings, one more thing. If you found yourself running out of wings, or maybe you want to add little radio antenna details, you want to give yourself extra canards, whatever the case may be, you can actually have more than just these 4 wings. If you go to standard and then MISC wings, miscellaneous wings, you've got all these blank tabs, I think there's 20 in total, that you can create wings for. So to create a miscellaneous wing, you just give yourself geometry values, and the process to shape them and position them is exactly the same. By default, you only have one element, so you can add more, add less, however many you like, and just create as many as you need for what you need them for. I don't really need them for this design, so I'm going to get rid of this one and make it semi-length 0. And that's that. So the last thing you'll want to be aware of when you are creating wings, probably not when you're modifying them, is that you can change the airfoil that your wing uses. So now the airfoil is the shape of the cross-section of the wing. So as you can see here, the elements are defined by these cross-sections. There is a program you can use to edit airfoils for X-plane, although most of you don't have that. If you do, it's called Airfoil Maker. It's It's a bit tricky to use, but it's quite useful if you know what it does. So to change your wing's airfoil, go to the Expert tab, and then click Airfoils. Surprise. And so you can see here you have categories for all of your wings, including the engine pylons, which are also created in the same way that wings are. Most of you won't have to worry about that. I'll get into that later. So since I don't have any miscellaneous wings to change airfoils for, I'm just going to be in the Wings tab. And so right now I've got my wing using a NACA 2412 airfoil, which is pretty popular in general aviation. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what makes airfoils good or not great for a specific thing, but depending on what kind of plane you're making, you will probably want to change this from the default. So if you are making a fighter, what I would recommend is, so first things first, to change your airfoil, you click on this box, and so there's two values here. So these airfoils are the airfoils you have at the root of your wing, and these are the ones you have at the tip of your wing. You can actually make these different and have X-Plane kind of interpolate between the two as you move along the chord of your wing. For most cases though, you'll want to use the same airfoil. So you click on this little box here, and then most of the airfoils you want are saved in the airfoils folder in the X system folder. So just open that. And now for a fighter, what I'm making, I want the flat plate or very thin airfoil. And so I'm just going to select that for all of these. So you notice there's a lot more airfoils in here. These airfoils are specifically optimized for supersonic flight. These are laminar flow, I think, or sorry, no, these are supercritical airfoils, which means they produce much less wave drag. If you want to research more about that, by all means go ahead, it's pretty interesting. Then all these symmetrical airfoils are obviously symmetrical. They don't have a camber really, which is what the curve of an airfoil is called. Some of these are optimized to create more lift. Some of these are inverted. We'll get into that later. So for a fighter, for your wings, I'd go with flat plate. If you're making an airliner, I'd go with these Boeing ones. For a general aviation aircraft, I would use maybe this one or the default. If you want to research more about airfoils, go ahead, it's pretty interesting. So yeah, that's basically all you need to know to create a wing in the most basic sense of what you need it for. So now you can see my airplane's starting to look like an airplane. I have a fuselage, I've got wings, and right now that's about it, but we'll get into more stuff in later videos. So you can see the creation of wings is fairly simple. There's not a lot to it. Once you understand what the various parts of a wing are, it'll get pretty easy. And yeah, that's about all you need to know for today about wings. So yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. And as always, come over to the office hours if you need help on any PlaneMaker related topics. And I'll see you in the next one.